Good day to my fifth graders. I'm going to be continuing to read the Tale of Desperaux to you, and this first couple of chapters are going to be from Mr. McGuan's classroom to catch you up a little bit. Chapter 12, Adieu. The sound of the drum changed again. The final tat disappeared and became nothing but boom, 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 boom. Lester used only his tail, bringing it down with great force and seriousness upon the drum. The threadmaster retreated. The roomful of mice fell silent, expecting, waiting. And as Desperaux stood before them with the red thread around his neck, the 14 members of the Mouth Council perched on the brick above him. 2 burly mice came forward. Black pieces of cloth covered their heads. There were slits for their eyes. "We," said the bigger of the 2 mice, "will escort you to the dungeon." "Desperaux!" Antoinette called out. "Ah, my Desperaux!" Desperaux looked into the crowd of mice and saw his mother. She was easy to spot. In honor of her youngest mouse being sent to the dungeon, she'd put on a tremendous amount of makeup. Each of the hooded mice put a paw on Despero's shoulder. "It's time," said the one on the left, the first hood. Antoinette pushed her way through the crowd. "He's my son. I want to have a last word with my son." Desperaux looked at his mother. He concentrated on standing before her without trembling. He concentrated on not being a disappointment. "Please," said Antoinette, "what will happen to him? What will happen to my baby?" "Ma'am," said the first hood. His voice was deep and slow. "You don't want to know." "I want to know. I want to know. He's my child, the child of my heart, the last of my mice babies." The hooded mice said nothing. "Tell me," said Antoinette. "The rats," said the first. "The rats," said the second. Yes, we the rats, what of them?" "The rats will eat him," said the second hood. "Ah," said Mon Dieu. Said Antoinette, "Mon Dieu, mon Dieu." At the thought of being eaten by rats, Desperaux forgot about being brave, and he forgot about not being a disappointment. He felt himself heading into another fate, but his mother, who had an excellent sense of dramatic timing, beat him to it. She executed a beautiful, flawless swoon, landing right at Desperaux's feet. "Now you've done it," said the first hood. "Doesn't matter," said the second. "Step over her. We've got a job to do. Nobody's mother's going to stop us. To the dungeon." "To the dungeon," repeated the first hood, but his voice, so deep and certain a moment ago, now shook a tiny bit. He put a paw on Desperaux and tugged him forward. The 2 hoods and Desperaux stepped over Antoinette. The crowd parted. The mice began again to chant, "To the dungeon, to the dungeon, to the dungeon." The drumbeat continued. Boom, 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 and Desperaux was led away. At the last moment, Antoinette came out of her faint and shouted one word to her child. That word, reader, was adieu. Do you know the definition of adieu? Adieu? Don't bother with your dictionary. I will tell you. Adieu is the French word for farewell. Farewell is not the words you'd like to hear from your mother as you're being led to the dungeon by 2 oversized mice in black hoods. Words you would like to hear are, "Take me instead. I'll go to the dungeon in my son's place." There's a great deal of comfort in this word. But, reader, there is no comfort in the word farewell, even if you say it in French. Farewell is a word that, in any language, is full of sorrow. It is a word that promises absolutely nothing. Chapter 13. Perfidy Unlimited. Together, the 3 mice traveled down, down, down. The thread around Despero's neck was tight. He felt as if it was choking him. He tugged at it with one paw. "Don't touch the thread," barked the second hood. "Yes," said the first hood, "don't touch the thread." They moved quickly, and whatever Desperaux slowed, one of the 2 hoods poked him in the shoulder and told him to keep going. They went through holes in the walls and down golden stairs. They went past rooms with doors that were closed and doors that were flung wide. The 3 mice traveled across marble floors and under heavy velvet drapes. They moved through warm patches of sunlight and dark pools of shade. This, thought Desperaux, was the world he was leaving behind, the world that he knew and loved. And somewhere in it the Princess P was laughing and smiling and clapping her hands to music, unaware of Despero's fate. That he would not be able to let the princess know what had become of him seemed suddenly unbearable to the mouse. Would it be possible for me to have a last word with the princess? Desperaux asked. A word, said the second hood. You want a word with a human. I want to tell her what's happened to me. Jeez, said the first hood. He stopped and stamped a paw on the floor in frustration. Cripes, you can't learn, can you? The voice was terribly familiar to Desperaux. Furlough? He said. What? Said the first hood irritably. Desperaux shuddered. His own brother was delivering him to the dungeon. His heart stopped beating and shrank to a small, cold, disbelieving pebble. But then, just as quickly, it leapt alive again, beating with hope. Furlough, Desperaux said as he took one of his brother's paws in his own. Please let me go, please, I'm your brother. Furlough rolled his eyes. He took his paw out of Desperoux's. No, he said, no way. Please, said Desperaux. No, said Furlough, rules are rules. Reader, do you recall the word perfidy? As our story progresses, perfidy becomes an ever more appropriate word, doesn't it? Perfidy was certainly the word that was in Desperoux's mind as the mice finally approached the narrow, steep stairs that led to the black hole of the dungeon. They stood, the 3 mice, 2 with hoods and 1 without, and contemplated the abyss before them. And then Furlough stood up on his hind legs and placed his right paw over his heart. For the good of the castle mice, he announced to the darkness, we delivered this day to the dungeon a mouse in need of punishment. He is, according to the laws we have established, wearing the red thread of death. The red thread of death? Repeated Desperaux in a small voice. Wearing the red thread of death was a terrible phrase, but the mouse didn't have long to consider its implications because he was suddenly pushed from behind by the hooded mice. The push was a strong one, and it sent Desperaux flying down the stairs and through the dungeon. As he tumbled whisker over tail through the darkness, there were only 2 words in his mind. One was perfidy, and the other word that he clung to was P. Perfidy, P, perfidy, P. Those were the words that pinwheeled through Desperoux's mind as his body descended into the darkness. And here's our picture of the 3 mice. And that's the end of our story.